Welcome to another episode of Track It. This is another slightly strange video, as most videos on this channel are turning out to be, but it is a build review which I think you are probably quite interested in, and it also explains why we really haven't made much content this year. Back in May, we decided to convert Mart's Clio 182 from a cammed and throttle bodied car into a turbo converted car. Now, the car was pretty good beforehand. It was stripped out, it made pretty good power, and it sounded absolutely fantastic. But the engine had started to use a bit of oil, so we wanted to try and sort that out and also try something new. As you get older, you tend not to want to have a very hardcore car and actually would like to have something which is also enjoyable to drive on the road and doesn't shake your bones to pieces. So that was the kind of goal of this project. So we filmed it a little bit up to getting the engine out, and you can watch that now. Quality.
How much are you enjoying that?
0. This is an awful job. My back hurts and my knee. We're saving these nuts because you use these to attach the turbo manifold to the head as well, so keep those safe. That's almost where the footage ends for this build, but it certainly is not where the work ended for it. There was a massive amount to do after getting the engine out. Luckily, however, we stumbled across a ready-built engine which was intended for a very nice track car or a race car. Anyway, whatever it was, the project was never completed, so we were more than happy to take that off their hands because it saved us a lot of time in getting the original engine refreshed. So then we needed to dress the engine, and a turbo conversion is not uncommon on a Clio. It's been done hundreds of cars, or maybe even thousands, but parts are readily available. We, however, wanted to make sure that we took the parts that we could get from like a standard kit, but also some additional parts that would make it very high quality and slightly different to lots of others. At the time, I thought it would be a good idea to film, so here is me going over what we did to the engine. As far as changes to the engine goes, it's completely standard inside because it's only a low boost conversion. On the top end though, we've gone a heat range colder on the plugs, and actually the plugs are much cheaper than standard, they're £2 each. As far as this goes, it's got a standard inlet on it now. It's got Megane 225 injectors, which are the same ones that it ran on the throttle body kit, but got some brand new ones. And other than that, there's nothing that's really changed on here. On the back end is where it changes the most. So Of course, there's now an enormous snail on it. Well, it's not that enormous, but it's from a Nissan Silvia S15 Spec R. So it's a JDM one, it's a ball bearing unit, a Garrett one. It's a GT2560R, also known as a GT28R. Because this is the Spec R1, it's the 1441191FOO. They also do another one which is 69FOO, which has a slightly different turbine housing. It's a cast log manifold with a copper gasket, pretty thick one to allow for any flex and buckling when it heats up. And we've got Inconel studs with Hyco lock washers and high temp K nuts. So that should stop this whole thing from flexing and opening up under the heat. There are loads of different things that you can do for the plumbing. We've got an AEM4 feed line, we've actually got an AEM8 drain, and then these are 3/8 barb fittings for the coolant lines. Depending on what turbo you've got, these things will slightly change. The downpipe is an engine dynamics one, which comes with basically a 3-inch V-band adapter and then a 2.5-inch pipe. These are the original Nissan bolts, which I think are Inconel as well to stop them stressing under the heat. And then we've got the original Nissan copper gasket in there as well. The only other alterations that we've had to make to the turbo are the wastegate. We had to slightly clock it. Because of how this turbo originally sat on the Nissan, it actually sat, instead of like this, it sat like that. So we had to clock the core and then try and get as many degrees on it as we could to allow for proper coolant circulation. Because we clocked it, we also had to then bend the wastegate actuator. Originally it kind of came along like this and then went like that to go around the oil feed, but a bit of hammer persuasion allowed us to get this bending it. The only other thing then are the adapters. So this is a 2-inch outlet on the compressor and a 2.5-inch inlet on the compressor. These are just from eBay, but relatively good quality ones as well. So I think that's it for the engine. It's ready to go back in the car now, so it looks like a big lump to get in there, which it is, but let's see if we can do it. I missed out a couple of pretty important details in that, so I'll go over those now to make sure that you can see everything that we've done. The oil feed was made of Goodrich Series 600 hose, and we picked that hose because it's PTFE, which is what you would use for an oil feed anyway. They have a special type of fitting, but the Series 600 is very, very highly rated for temperature, which is exactly what you want in this area with the core of the turbo getting so hot. With all that heat, the engine is getting hot as well, so we made some cooling upgrades, and they were a Direnza rad, which is a rad about 45% bigger than a standard Clio rad. We went for the cup version instead of the non-cup version because the cup one is marginally bigger than the, I'd say, non-cup with the air conditioning allowable radiator that they do, so you want all of the capacity that you can get with this cooling system. To go with that, we had a 75-degree thermostat from a Clio 197. It's a standard thermostat. We went for the Gates one. I think it's about £9. A bit of a no-brainer to give you that extra cooling capacity. For the engine management, we have an FIC8, which is an AEM piggback ECU. The FIC8 is the version which allows electronic boost control, and that is the only difference that you would notice when you're doing a Clio turbo conversion. There is also an FIC6 which doesn't have an electronic boost control. Both will work absolutely fine. However, they do not make these ECUs anymore, so you're going to find more 6s in the second-hand market because they made more of them, they were cheaper, they sold more. However, if you want electronic boost control, you need to go for the 8. The last thing is we fitted a high flow fuel pump. Now this isn't strictly needed, but just something that we decided to fit to future-proof the car. Now we've gone over the engine, we shouldn't ignore the fact that a massive amount of time went onto the interior. And what did we start with? Well, it wasn't really very much. All of the looms have been completely stripped of any unnecessary wiring. That includes stripping the door looms to include only 2 wires for the solenoid in the door lock. There was no wiring for electric windows or mirrors or anything like that, so we had to add all of that back in. The dash loom is a completely custom unit. It is, well, it started life as a DCI or a diesel Clio loom, and the reason that we did that is because it's got factory electronic power steering wiring in, which is what we wanted to use to utilise the proper fused connections that come in a factory car. That has also allowed us to wire the electronic power steering into the CAN bus network for diagnostics, and also have the light on the dash whilst using the eBay controller to allow you to adjust the assistance on the fly, and maybe give it slightly less than you would have if you were using the factory factory values for speed referencing. We've also added in an oil temperature and pressure gauge. They are a Spa one, and also I shouldn't forget the DRE5 shift light on the dash. That's part of a slightly separate loom, but it is powered from the main dash loom. We added in a couple of super seal connectors to the dash loom with wiring that we'd stripped out. We then utilised the 12 volts from that to run proper fused connections for any of the accessories and additional instrumentation that we were running on the car. So that is pretty much integrated, but also a removable loom if required. We then removed any unnecessary stuff, things like the unnecessary airbag wiring, and we reprogrammed all of the ECUs to make sure that the light illuminated on the dash when you turn the key, but also extinguished as they should. We removed the automatic lights, we removed the climate control and swapped that for manual heating controls. We added cruise control into this loom, and I'll go over that in a second. And we removed, what else did we remove? The ESP. But anyway, we removed all of these systems and reprogrammed the ECU to allow for that. The cruise control then is slightly interesting, and I think it's the first one that has ever been done like this. We got the radio stalk and we adjusted the the volume stalk behind the steering wheel to adapt for cruise control. That meant a little bit of jiggery pokery within the actual unit itself. So you've got plus and minus, which now do the speed. The two buttons on top cancel it, and the bottom button resumes the cruise control once you've turned it off. We then had to print a custom PCB board and glue the standard resistors on it to then go into the normal cruise control lines. This allows us to have a lifeline boss, so basically a removable steering wheel. We don't have to have one of those long wires like you have on a race car when they don't have a factory squib. And if we did want to use the factory squib, they're getting pretty expensive now, and they're a rare item. They only came on late 172s and 182s, so getting one of those is actually pretty difficult now. Last but not least, well, a couple of things. We did an LED dash conversion. We did white and red LEDs.
Hello, I'm Martin's dashboard. I've had some of my lights replaced.
We needed a mixture of, I think it's 3mm dome LEDs and PLCC-2 LEDs. I think they're 3528s, although I'll put the size up on the screen right now if you want to do a similar conversion. It just makes the interior much fresher. It makes it feel like a much more modern car. Then the last thing is that we did sound deadening. The factory sound deadening is pretty heavy. It's basically just bitumen almost, and slapped in pretty generic places, not always all that accurately. We found some really high performance stuff so we could put it more liberally everywhere, and also keep the weight down while we're at it, but make it a nice refined place to be. So that is the car. It took a very, very long time to complete. We started in May and we went for mapping in November. Here is a clip of it at the mapping at Engine Dynamics. What numbers did it make then? Well, it was very successful. The turbo spooled up really, really early, as you expected from a ball bearing unit. It did 245 bhp at 6,250 and 223 foot-pound of torque at about 5,200. I'll put the graph up now. You can see that the previous graph is what it was like on throttle bodies. So the throttle bodies were already above standard. The turbo is just a completely different animal. Yes, people talk about peak figures, and yeah, it's probably got, let's say, 40 horsepower more than when it was on bodies and cabs. However, it is area under the graph in this instance, and torque is hugely improved with the turbo. We're also running factory cams, basically a completely factory engine, which is slightly different. We've managed to get the OEM ECU, so we've got fantastic hold start functions now. It really is just a brilliant package. So last weekend we finally got to do a track day. We wanted to do this all year, and we wanted to get a shakedown in the car, and it just felt right to go and suddenly book a track day, and we managed to get Bedford just over 100 quid, and we had a fantastic session. Here are a couple of clips from that day. We didn't do any filming like this on the day, but it was really, really good, and I think we can call the project a success. Just before I play this, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you watching the videos. I am going to be putting out more videos very, very shortly. I'm just about to do a full turbo conversion on my existing track car, my Cup. I would, of course, really appreciate you watching those videos. It will be not totally step by step, but it will show you pretty much the whole process, so I'm really looking forward to putting that out. If you want to subscribe, great. I don't really care if you do or not. I just hope you enjoy the videos, and I hope you find them useful. Anyway, here is the footage from Bedford, and I'll see you in the video very soon.